You're listening to I Love This TV Show, The Golden Girls.
The Golden Girls, Season 3, Episode 10, The Audit. Original air date, November 28, 1987. In this episode, Sophia is making a spaghetti sauce in the kitchen. Dorothy thinks it's delicious. Blanche comes in upset that she hasn't had a date in 8 days. She gets dramatic. Rose comes in. She's excited about something new she will be doing. Rose tells them she can't have her promotion at work unless she becomes bilingual. Blanche thinks she means bisexual. Rose signed up for a Spanish class. Blanche decides to take the class too, because it's a great way to meet men. The doorbell rings. Rose decides to immerse herself in the culture. At the door, it's Stan. No one's happy to see him. Stan informs Dorothy that they are being audited. Dorothy is furious. He's going to bring all the paperwork over tomorrow night for them to go through. Dorothy is extremely upset. The next evening, Rose heads off to class, and Blanche goes with her. She's all dressed up, though. Stanley arrives. All his paperwork is in a garbage bag. He tries to sweet-talk Sophia, but it doesn't work. They start to go over the first tax return, and immediately Dorothy finds something that she did not know about. He gets all dramatic and gives a speech from a movie. She then asks about a $2,500 deduction for a gift. It was for her diamond ring. She thanks him, but then notices the deductions for a Corvette. She starts screaming at him and throws him out. She wants Stan to go to jail and get a very scary boyfriend. Sophia comes out to see what the racket is about. It's now the day of the audit. Dorothy is still very upset. They get called into the auditor's office, and Stan offends the man almost instantly. He tells Stan to cut the crap out. They wind up owing only $5,000. They have 30 days to each come up with their half, $2,500 each. Stan starts to cry, but Dorothy rubs more salt in the wounds, hits him, and then leaves. That night, Blanche comes home to find Rose studying for the Spanish test. Blanche gives her the answers to the test. Rose immediately assumes Blanche slept with the teacher, but Blanche tells her she didn't sleep with him, she just promised she would. Rose, however, refuses to cheat. She tells Blanche a story about cheating. She fed BBs to her pig to get his weight up to win at the county fair. Dorothy comes in the kitchen. She can't sleep. Sophia joins them as well. Dorothy only has half of the amount that she's got to return, that she's got to pay back to the government. She decides that she's going to have to sell some of her possessions to make up the difference. The next day, Dorothy and the girls take a box of things to a pawn shop. Rose tries out her Spanish, but the guy thinks she's trying to rob him. He only offers Dorothy $100 for the whole box. Blanche tries to give the items a big backstory to increase their value, but he tells her the only thing that's worth anything is the ring she's wearing. He offers her $800 to start and goes all the way up to $1,200. She doesn't want to part with it until Blanche reminds her who Stan left her for. Dorothy comes home to find the two of them on the couch, Rose and Blanche, instead of at Spanish class. The doorbell rings and it's Stan. She gives him the check for her half. He gives her a gift. It's her ring. Sophia told him about it. Rose asks how he came up with the money. He tells him he sold the Corvette. Dorothy thanks him, telling him it's the nicest thing he's ever done for her. He starts to reminisce, and then he asks her if she wants to go to bed. Favorite quotes. Rose, ooh, Italian food? Sophia, no, Rose, actually it's Chinese food wearing a marinara suit. Stanley, these are my tax receipts. Our future is in this bag. Dorothy, how appropriate. Rose, being bilingual really gets me confused. Sophia, Ziploc bags get you confused. Sophia, and that's a beautiful toupee you're wearing. There, now we're both liars. Dorothy, to Stan. I could vomit just looking at you. Dorothy, just shut up and put your hair on. Rose. Blanche, these are the answers to the test. Where did you get these? Blanche, I'll give you one guess. Rose, you slept with the teacher. Dorothy, I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see Uncle Sam going through my purse. Stanley, I guess I finally became what I feared the most. Another middle-aged, bald guy who drives a Toyota. This episode, I feel very bad for Dorothy because she finally learns a little bit, and not everything, unless she actually goes through every single one of these tax returns at some point herself, and they're only for a certain section of time, but she learns about all of the things that Stan did completely behind her back and never told her. She realizes, this is far worse than just the cheating situation. He bought a car without telling her, and all these other things. When you're married, you're on the hook for your spouse's debts, whether that be your husband, your wife, your partner, etc. And these are all different things that she had no clue about, but would have been financially responsible for if Stan died. Oh my God. I mean, it's a lot to take on. It's a lot to consider. All of these different things. And it just reinforces for Dorothy how many lies he's told her over the years, straight to her face, and lies by omission. And her line of, Stanley, I could vomit just looking at you. Well, no, she didn't actually say Stanley. I added that for context, but still, it's like, wow, how on earth? How do you reconcile that in your head? That's 38 years. That's a long time to be married to someone and discover after you've ended that relationship, after the divorce has gone through, that you're still having your life destroyed by this person because of actions they took that they never informed you of. Your life has pretty much become consequences for unknown actions. I'm not even sure how I could fathom or process that. He did all these things without telling her, without checking her. You're married, you're supposed to be partners, you're supposed to talk about everything, you're supposed to discuss everything. You're supposed to make decisions together, not do all these things behind your partner's back and leave them completely in the dark. I very much understand, like, there's episodes where Dorothy has said, I don't even know if I ever knew him. And I mean, it's the truth. I mean, she knows kind of the core of him, but he kept her in the dark on so many things that it's just overwhelming. I mean, it's one thing if you don't tell your partner, your spouse, a story about your childhood, but you're making all these financial decisions on your own, and all of these can negatively impact the other person. But Stan is selfish, and he doesn't think about how this could affect Dorothy. And then even when he comes to her and tells her they're being audited, he's still really only looking at it from his point of view. He's not caring how it affects her. And his selfishness just makes me so upset. Because we're all human beings. We all have to pay bills. We all have to live. We all have to have a roof over our head. We all have to be able to survive. And he's basically put her in a position of, bankruptcy. He's still completely financially fine because he did all this stuff without telling her. And he's doing great. But he's left her even with a divorce, barely with anything. He has a place by himself. He lives by himself. Dorothy rents a room and lives with 3 other people. There's this whole, difference of lifestyle, difference of income. And it becomes very clear. It's not something that seems to be discussed all that often. Because the point of the story was that these 4 ladies live together. But none of them are really living together because they want to be. They're living together because financially they don't have another choice. Stan can afford to live by himself, but Dorothy cannot. Blanche cannot, even though she owns the house. Sophia cannot, and Rose cannot, even though they're all employed. But Stan, who is employed, can. And he can still buy all this crazy stuff. So, from my perspective, it's also very demonstrative of the wage gap between women and men in the workforce. In the 80s, it was much, 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 much more prevalent than it is nowadays. I think now it's a much smaller percentage. It's still there, it's not been eradicated, but it's been significantly reduced, and it needs to be completely eradicated still. But literally, the cost of living in that time frame in that city required 4 women to share a house in order to survive. But one man could still make enough by himself to have his own place and survive without any real problem. 4 women have to live together. One man does not have to live with anyone. It's very telling and very trying. Now, the second storyline is about Rose and her Spanish class. She wanted to get a promotion at work, but it requires her to speak English and Spanish. Oh boy. Blanche always thinks everything is sexual. It's funny, but it's true. And she doesn't realize bilingual and bisexual are 2 different things. She gets educated, of course, but it's like, wow. And eventually the 2 just drop the class. I don't know why Rose drops the class, because I don't think that's ever made clear, unless she's just really struggling and she's failing. But Blanche most likely dropped the class because, well, there probably weren't enough men for her to go on dates with. And she mustn't have liked that teacher well enough to actually sleep with him, because she only safe teased him, as she likes to call it, and just promised to sleep with him for the answers to the test. Which is quite interesting. Normally, Blanche doesn't really require much motivation, so it's quite unique. The only person we don't really see a whole lot in this episode is Sophia. And Sophia is more background in this episode. She does have some great lines, but she's not like the main story between Stan and Dorothy in the Audit. And she's not in like the B story that much between Rose and Blanche in the Spanish class. But she does have great lines that interacts with. It is kind of just shocking how Stan has acted. Not just that he's exposed in this episode, but how he's actually gotten away with all of that horrific behavior his entire life. Literally his entire life. He's basically treated everyone like garbage for his own benefit. Not the best kind of person. And I really do feel bad that Dorothy was married to him for 38 years. It does make me happy, though, that she never really got back together with him in a long term. But we all know there's a couple of short-term trysts that they had together, but ultimately she came back to her senses, because a leopard cannot change its spots. Thanks for tuning in to the I Love This TV Show podcast. If you would like to make a donation in support of this podcast, you can through Cash App to Pasta26MC. That's pasta like the food, the number 2, the number 6, M as in monkey, C as in cat. If you would like to sponsor this podcast or advertise on it, please send an email to podcast@pastasworld.com. As always, you can go to pastasworld.com for more information.